Eliana Cruz arrived backstage at the renowned television studio just as the morning's energy surged through the halls. Her faded jeans and simple blouse contrasted with the chilly precision of the studio's polished floors and the sleek equipment that gleamed under bright overhead lights. She carried a small leather bag slung over her shoulder, and the flush on her cheeks hinted at the hurried walk she'd taken through the city streets, her pulse still lingering in quick rhythms. The chaos of the city was replaced here by a buzz of ordered professionalism. Crew members in crisp uniforms moved efficiently, voice levels kept low but purposeful, while the sharp clicks of cameras and mutterings of production staff filled the air like a tightly orchestrated symphony. Clusters of well-dressed employees whispered and gestured with the ease of practiced insiders. Eliana's arrival stirred a ripple of quiet curiosity. A few cautious eyes flicked her way, noticing the unassuming charm in her modest posture, simple clothes that whispered neither grandeur nor desperation, nor did she wear the look of a stressed newcomer. Yet something indefinable lingered as if she carried a story unspoken beneath the surface. No one approached, but the undercurrent of judgment felt palpable, as if passing silent verdicts. From across the room, Martin Reyes caught sight of her. The lead producer's reputation for sharp edges and unapologetic dominance preceded him like a shadow. His gaze narrowed, instantly dismissing her presence. "Hey, you," he barked, voice sharp enough to slice through the murmurs that fluttered around. "Where do you think you're going? We need someone to grab the cables left near stage 5. You look like you could handle that." He smirked, the mockery clear. "Don't want you wandering where you don't belong in that getup. This isn't a place for tourists." The arrogance of low assumption colored every syllable. Eliana met his gaze for a heartbeat, her lips lifting in a slight, knowing smile. "Right away," she said softly, but rather than heading toward the cable storage, she pivoted down a quieter corridor, leaving surprise flickering across Martin's face before he shrugged and returned to his work, unaware she had no intention to obey. Eliana's footsteps echoed softly as she moved away from the clamor of the bustling studio floor, choosing a quieter hallway where the glow from recessed lighting softened. She carried the small leather bag lightly, her pace steady and unhurried, betraying none of the anticipation she felt beneath her calm exterior. The sharp command to fetch cables still lingered in her mind, not as an insult, but as a test she had purposefully declined. Instead of approaching the storage rooms backstage, Eliana made her way toward the executive offices perched quietly at the heart of the building. A few stray whispers rippled from the corridor she left behind, but none followed her. The studio's polished demeanor hung heavy in the air, yet Eliana had long mastered navigating these spaces undetected until the right moment. At the door to the Human Resources Director's suite, she paused to smooth the soft lines of her blouse and check her reflection one last time in the glass panel. A single knock preceded the door swinging open. David Lopez, the senior HR leader known for both his fairness and quiet strength, greeted her with a welcoming smile and outstretched hand. His warm charisma softened the room's sterility and replaced any lingering tension with reassurance. "Eliana, welcome," he said, firm but kind. "We've been looking forward to your arrival." She shook his hand with a small smile, her voice calm yet confident. "Thank you, David. It feels good to be here." Inside, the suite's muted tones and tasteful decor reflected the understated authority carried by its occupant. David gestured toward a leather chair opposite his desk as he closed the door behind them. "Let's get straight to it," he began, his eyes betraying no hint of surprise as if her presence were an inevitability rather than an intrusion. "You are officially the Executive Vice President of Studio Operations. As you know, that means you oversee all aspects of production, development, and leadership here." Eliana nodded succinctly, acknowledging the weight of the role with measured respect. David continued, "Your track record speaks volumes. Successful formats from your tenure in New York garnered top ratings, and your leadership in London elevated struggling teams into award-winning productions. The board is unanimous in their confidence." She felt the familiar steadiness wash over her, the reassurance of competence recognized, but never flaunted. Meanwhile, tucked away in the shadows of the producer's lounge, Martin Reyes animatedly recounted the morning's encounter with Eliana to a small group of colleagues, his voice brimming with self-assured bravado. "I told her to go get cables, and she didn't push back, not even a whimper. Jeans, sneakers, the works. Perfect temp material," Martin said with a laugh, brushing off any possibility of challenge. "I had her pegged before she even stepped through the door. Easy." His confidant nodded and chuckled, feeding on his certainty. "Watch, she's going to realize real power here isn't about titles. It's about knowing the ropes, and I run those ropes," he added smugly. Back in the glass-walled suite, David folded a dossier and placed it on the desk. "There's careful strategy behind your arrival. The studio's culture needs steady hands to guide growth without disruption. That's where you come in." Eliana's steady gaze met his. "I intend to support teams, build trust, and spur innovation. First impressions mean little without proven performance." David smiled, a flicker of pride lighting his features. "Exactly why you're the right person." They spent the next hour discussing upcoming productions, operational challenges, and avenues for cultural renewal. Eliana absorbed every detail, her mind weaving tactical possibilities faster than she allowed herself to breathe. There was a rhythm to such transitions, some rushed loudly, while others advanced like shadows, patient, inexorable. As she prepared to leave, David paused. "One more thing. Be aware that Martin wouldn't take this well. He's confident in his turf. But leadership isn't a battle to be won with bravado. It's about earned respect." Eliana's lips curved into a small, assured smile. "Understood." That afternoon, as production assistants moved with practiced urgency and directors called quiet commands just beyond soundproof doors, a quiet shift had taken root. Eliana had entered the studio's inner chamber, not under the guise of the lowly assistant Martin expected, but as the architect of its future. She returned to a side entrance, blending again into the hum of creation and control, but now carrying the unbreakable weight of authority beneath her unassuming demeanor. Martin's laughter echoed distant and hollow in the break room, unaware that the player he had dismissed so easily was already holding the true cards. The studio held an unexpected buzz that afternoon, a ripple of unease and anticipation running beneath the polished professionalism. A company-wide meeting had been called with little notice, and word traveled swiftly amongst the production teams, editors, and administrative staff. Whispers speculated, some hopeful, others cautious, as employees gathered in the main production hall, a cavernous space dominated by towering monitors, bright lighting rigs, and sleek control panels. Martin Reyes, usually punctual and commanding, arrived noticeably late. His signature confident gait faltered the moment he stepped into the room. Heads turned as he scanned the assembly. There, unmistakably, seated at the head of the imposing conference table, sat Eliana Cruz. The spot Martin often occupied in command meetings was no longer his. His sharp eyes met hers briefly, a flash of disbelief crossed his features. David Lopez, standing just beside Eliana, raised his hand for silence. His voice, calm but firm, sliced through the murmuring crowd. "Thank you all for attending on such brief notice," he began. "This meeting marks an important transition in our studio's leadership. I am honored to introduce Eliana Cruz as our new Executive Vice President of Studio Operations." A hush settled over the room. David's words carried authority, a deliberate tone that left no room for misunderstanding. Eliana rose gracefully, her calm presence commanding immediate attention. Her attire was simple, a tailored dark sweater and slacks, practical yet professional, reflecting the hands-on leadership style she championed. She cast her gaze over the gathered staff, acknowledging familiar faces and observing the mix of curiosity, skepticism, and measured respect. Martin's mouth tightened. His dominant persona, so long presumed unassailable, suddenly seemed fragile. When David invited him to say a few words, the response was stammered, tense, the words tangled as he struggled to reclaim authority that was quietly slipping. Silence enveloped the room again as Eliana took her place beside David. With measured poise, she addressed the assembly. "I understand change can be challenging," she began, voice steady and warm. "Leadership is not about replacing faces, it's about building on strengths and addressing weaknesses with honesty and collaboration. I am here to work with each of you toward a future where creativity and efficiency thrive side by side." Her confident delivery and genuine tone began to thaw the room's early tension. People leaned in, ears attuned to every word. Martin shifted in his seat, no longer the center of attention. His shoulders slumped slightly, the mask of invincibility cracking. The discomfort in his eyes betrayed the realization: Eliana was no temporary figurehead, but the new driving force behind the studio's vision. Around the room, reaction varied. Some nodded thoughtfully, others exchanged whispered comments that spoke volumes. Respect mixed with lingering doubt, but the atmosphere had irrevocably shifted. Eliana's gaze lingered momentarily on the production leads and technical supervisors, silently surveying the strengths and challenges she was about to inherit. She detected pockets of resistance, but also eagerness, and in that balance, she found opportunity. David concluded the introductions with a reminder of the studio's ambitious goals for innovation and quality, framing the leadership change as a strategic move to enhance both. As the meeting adjourned, conversations resumed with a distinct change in tone. Where gossip and speculation had once floated freely, now discussions centered on practical collaboration and measured welcome. Martin remained near the back for a moment longer, casting a reluctant glance toward Eliana. Their eyes met, a brief exchange filled with unspoken tension, caution, and an acknowledgement that the established order had shifted. Eliana gathered her materials and moved deliberately toward the exit, her stride steady with the quiet assurance of a leader beginning to claim her authority. Outside, the hum of production seemed infused with a new energy. The studio was not merely a place of work today, it was a space where roles were renegotiated and possibilities reopened. Martin's usual bravado had met its challenge in the poised presence of Eliana Cruz, and the staff collectively sensed that the chapter unfolding now was unlike any they had known before. The pulse of the studio beat stronger, tempered by the arrival of a leader who would shape its course not by force but by steady vision and resolute confidence. After the meeting, the studio floor seemed to breathe anew, a subtle shift of weight, an invisible current altering every interaction. Eliana Cruz stood poised before an attentive crowd of production staff and department heads, the undercurrent of curiosity now tempered by respect. The low hum of whispered doubts that had swirled moments before had quieted. Now, the future demanded focus. David Lopez stepped forward, his voice steady and purposeful. "Before Eliana shares her vision, it's important everyone understands the depth of her experience." He gestured toward her. "She has spent the last decade leading some of the most successful studios across 3 countries. Her awards for creative leadership aren't just decorations but recognition of transformative work, raising ratings while preserving quality and fostering healthy creative environments." Heads turned, eyes widening in recognition or thoughtful reconsideration. The casual mockery that had brushed Eliana's simple attire away was now replaced by serious attention. This was no novice disguised beneath jeans and a blouse, but a professional whose credentials carried weight beyond any uniform's fabric. Eliana smiled, appreciative but composed. "Thank you, David," she began, her voice clear and engaging. I want to take a moment to address something that some of you may have noticed today, my choice of attire. She gestured lightly at her practical dark sweater and slacks. A few brows arched, but the room held its breath, waiting. I arrived straight from a morning workout at a gym nearby, she continued, deliberately dressed simply. Not because I don't value professionalism, but because I wanted to observe the culture unfiltered, how people behave when they don't know exactly who you are. A ripple of interest passed among the crowd. A subtle nod here, a whispered murmur there. Eliana's candidness broke through the performative layers that often obscured true workplace dynamics. Leadership, to me, isn't about showmanship or appearances, she said, softening her tone. It's about genuine connection, fairness, and integrity. How we treat one another when no one is watching tells us who we truly are. She paused, letting the words sink in. For years, I have believed that empowering teams depends on open communication and true meritocracy. Every voice deserves to be heard, every contribution matters. The room absorbed her words, the mood shifting palpably. The mixture of humility and authority in her speech was disarming. Martin Reyes stood near the rear, discomfort creasing his face. The ease and authenticity in her demeanor contrasted sharply with his practiced arrogance. It was a quiet rebuke without a word spoken. Continuing, Eliana outlined her vision. We face challenges and opportunities that require innovative thinking and collaboration. I expect us to cultivate an environment where creativity thrives unimpeded by hierarchy or fear. She scanned her audience, meeting eyes that now held genuine curiosity. My door is open. Questions and feedback are welcome. We grow together or not at all. An assistant timidly raised a hand with a question about upcoming schedules, which Eliana answered thoughtfully, demonstrating detailed knowledge and empathy for their workload. Small exchanges like these dissolved lingering doubt. David rejoined her side, signaling support and an unspoken endorsement. The team's posture had changed, the casual scoffs replaced by attentive engagement. The cultural transformation Eliana embodied was more than a message, it was a lived example, grounded in decisive action and principled leadership. Later, in a quiet hallway away from the main crowd, Eliana crossed paths with Martin. Unlike before, there was no hostile glint in his eyes, only a flicker of reluctant respect. Their brief meeting included a subtle nod, no words necessary, but the message was unmistakable, a new era had begun. As she walked away, the echoing sound of footsteps matched the confident rhythm of a leader who had not only arrived but had begun to reshape the studio's very core. The following morning, the atmosphere in the television studio was taut with quiet anticipation. The reverberations from the previous day's announcement still echoed through the corridors, but now they carried a different tone, one of cautious acceptance and budding respect. Eliana Cruz's presence was no longer a curiosity but a firmly rooted reality. The staff had begun to recalibrate their expectations and adjust their attitudes accordingly. Behind closed doors, Martin Reyes sat rigidly in the HR office, the hum and flicker of the fluorescent lights amplifying the discomfort settling in his chest. David Lopez faced him with measured calm, embodying the institution's willingness to balance fairness with accountability. The conversation was crisp and direct. Martin, David began, his voice even but resolute, your talent as a lead producer has never been in question. However, leadership involves more than individual success. It demands professionalism and respect, especially toward your colleagues and senior executives. Martin's jaw tightened. He gritted his teeth but remained silent for a moment, realizing the gravity of the situation. Your recent behavior toward Ms. Cruz was inappropriate and unprofessional, David continued. This isn't just a reprimand, it's an opportunity for growth. To that end, you will be temporarily relieved of your lead producer duties and enrolled in leadership coaching focused on professional conduct and team dynamics. The weight of the words hung heavily in the room. Martin's usual defiant spark dulled, replaced by a grudging acceptance. "Understood," Martin muttered, the edges of his voice rough but compliant. Word of the directive filtered swiftly through the studio. What had once seemed an unchallengeable hierarchy now showed signs of fracture. Colleagues who had tolerated Martin's domineering conduct found renewed courage. Conversations shifted from whispered complaints to open dialogue about teamwork, respect, and shared goals. The hum of collaboration grew louder, stitching a new fabric of workplace culture. Eliana navigated the studio with composed assurance. Her footsteps echoed confidently across polished floors as production staff greeted her with genuine warmth and professional regard. The uncertainties that had colored their glances were replaced by acknowledgement of her steady, approachable leadership style. Her presence rippled beyond mere authority. It inspired a collective momentum toward unity and excellence. Later that day, fate choreographed a brief encounter in one of the studio's quieter hallways. Martin and Eliana crossed paths amid the muted backdrop of boxes and cables. The hum of distant equipment underscored the moment's gravity. Martin's gaze met Eliana's without evasion or hostility. There was no bitterness, only the quiet recognition of a changed landscape. He offered a simple nod, a gesture concise yet loaded with meaning, an acceptance of her elevated role and of the boundaries now clearly drawn. Eliana returned the nod with steady professionalism, neither conceding ground nor extending unnecessary grace. Their silent exchange conveyed mutual acknowledgement. The past was settled, and the future would be shaped by renewed dynamics. As Martin turned away, shoulders squared yet tempered, Eliana moved forward with the assured stride of a leader firmly in command. The studio floor buzzed with activity, directors calling cues, editors refining scenes, assistants coordinating logistics, all under the watchful yet unobtrusive eye of their new executive vice president. Eliana's presence had transformed the rhythm of the workplace, infusing it with a sense of purpose and belonging. Passing by a group of young crew members assembling equipment near the set, she offered a brief smile, listening attentively as they shared updates. Their enthusiasm was genuine, buoyed by the changed atmosphere and the promise of inspired leadership. The final moments of the day found Eliana pausing near the large windows overlooking the city skyline. The fading light cast long, elegant shadows across the studio's interior, symbols of transition and possibility. The weight of the day's challenges settled alongside the pride in progress made. Her simple attire, once the target of condescension, now stood as a quiet emblem of her leadership philosophy, practical, unpretentious, and focused on substance. In that moment, Eliana Cruz was not just an executive by title but a genuine force reshaping the heart of the studio. With a final glance at the illuminated studio bustling behind her, she stepped forward, embodying the confident, effective leadership the company, and its people, would come to rely on.